This is a discussion around the metaverse as a safe space. And the concept of the metaverse, which many of you would be slightly familiar with, and for good reason, is one that is still evolving. And probably by the end of this presentation, the formal definition of the metaverse will change. But the concept of what a metaverse is very much an easy to understand concept, which is that the metaverse is supposed to be a shared space where you have a virtual representation of yourself interacting with others, right? So once you keep those tenets there, the fact that it's a shared space, that you have a virtual representation of yourself, then you are in or a part of the metaverse. And it's not a new concept. Many people are not savvy with the fact that the metaverse didn't come around last October when Facebook renamed themselves. Metaverse has been around for many years, at least since 2017. And I think that would be something that many of you on the call know. It's been around with a different name. If you guys have kids that are playing games and are playing in these online communities, what they are playing in is the metaverse, but it's just never been called the metaverse before, right? Because they're playing games in these shared communities online where they have a virtual representation of their self, which is their avatar. It's something that shouldn't be new to any of us who have played games while we were younger. So it's just that it's becoming more than just a game or gaming platform, and it's becoming a new way for persons to actually do business, as we're going to see. And so with such a new development of what this new space is, of course, you're going to have some issues going along with it. But first of all, metaverse. Can the metaverse actually work for us in the region? Right? Do we even have the infrastructure to make the metaverse work? The truth is we do. We do. The metaverse, as it stands right now, is only going to make sense if it's accessible, right? Unlike when you're trying to connect up a new website to a payment provider and you have the limitation of where you live, or whether you're trying to go and go play movies and try to watch a movie and you say, oh, this is not available in Barbados or Jamaica. The metaverse as a concept is inclusive as possible. Just like the benefit that the internet gave at the start, where the borders were torn down because of that nice globalization, the same stands for the metaverse. Nobody on this call would be barred from entering the metaverse. That it's not part of its model. And why that's important for us is it means that we now have an opportunity to compete with all other players who are in the metaverse, right? So as they say here, donkey say the floor is not level. In this case, the floor is level. We have an opportunity to enter this space as a region and really make a change where people are actually purchasing goods, living, believe it or not, as I explained, and really doing business with no barrier to entry. So can it work for the region? For sure. 100%. And one of the things that I am very passionate about, my role here, by the way, is I lead a web development team here at ISSA. We do websites for companies here in Jamaica. We've done for a company in Barbados. And we've also done work as far as Rome. And we've worked because we're doing web development. It means that we don't have to fly to Rome to build a website for the person, as you all know, because there's no barrier to entry to web development, save maybe the language. So what does that mean for us in the region right now? Well, the metaverse is following this same pathway, and it's just a shared virtual space where you have these digital representations of yourself and are having interactions in an immersive experience. What that means is that there's no reason that as developments are happening in the metaverse, we as a region should be excluded. We have three things on our brothers and sisters all across the globe in Europe, India, Asia. When I say three things on them, I mean three things over them. The first is in terms of doing business with our hemisphere, there is no why we should not be the first choice for those in North America, so Canada and the US and Mexico to an extent, and also one of the highest potential options for those in South America. Why? We're on the same time zone as them. we're a hop skip away if somebody needs to come from Florida over to us in the region to work on a big project. They're not going across the globe. And we speak the same language, right? So to be very honest, there's no reason why someone in India should be getting the contracts that we are getting, right? Because we have the know-how, we have the language, especially in Barbados, we have such a high literacy rate. But throughout the region, we have the knowledge, and we are right there in the same hemisphere. It's like we've been given a boost, and it's really now time for us to take it on in the region. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, because it's like you've been given a silver spoon, and you spit it out your mouth and you throw it down and say, I'm going to start from scratch. It doesn't make sense when we have such a head start already. Now, why does the metaverse exist? Because many people on this call would have seen trends come and go. From hearing you guys, I know that there's a lot of wisdom between you, and there's also a lot of age. And wisdom brings gray hairs, of course. So many of you would have been around when Y2K happened, when the dot-com bubble crashed, and you would have seen a trend like this come up and then disappear like nothing. And through the ashes, of course, you had a couple companies that made it through. You had the Amazons, you had the eBays, the PayPal that came through, the X.com at the time. But of course, you had a lot of persons who speculated, made an investment, took a risk, and failed. And so many of you may be going towards this with the same skepticism. And I'm not here to say whether the metaverse is a good thing or a bad thing. Just like money, it is a tool. And as the Bible says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, right? And sometimes that's misquoted as money is the root of all evil. We know that it doesn't actually say that. It's like a tool. So understanding how to use the tool is going to be important for us to just look at why the metaverse exists. There are three main reasons that I see that go beyond the technology and go straight to the core reason why somebody would use this. The first is that people want to connect. I have a brief description there that's still saying brief description, but people want to connect, right? We found that when we had to go online during the pandemic, there was really nothing stopping people from still connecting. And that's why companies like Zoom, their value went up to 10x on what it was before. Companies like Blue Jeans, which are competitors to WebEx, as you all know, got acquired by Verizon for way more than they were valued at the year before. Because people realize that no matter what, we as human beings have that desire to connect. And nothing is really going to stop us from doing that. And so the metaverse is just an extension of that. It's another tool in our tool belt on how we're going to connect. Also, people want to present themselves new, right? The opportunity to show yourself in the best way possible. And that comes to the concept of an avatar. You see, on the metaverse, whether you were a previous offender of any kind, or whether you're a man who, for whatever reason, you want to put yourself online as a woman, this is another tool that people are using to present themselves in a way that is different from who they actually are or how they actually were. Because it gives you an opportunity to be a new person online. And that is something that people have wanted from the beginning of time. And the third reason that the metaverse is existing is people want to own valuable assets. And the metaverse is a way that people are finding to actually own digital assets. And there was a joke going around that right now, because of the metaverse, even with all the speculation and all the people that don't really believe in it, this is probably one of the only ways that millennials can now own property. Because property as it stands right now is skyrocketing, and it's not just in Jamaica, it's not just in Barbados, it's globally. There's been a construction boom since COVID, here specifically, and so the price of property is going up. Just like that, people are seeing a need for a way to diversify their assets, but they can't get into the real estate that they want. They can't own a piece of the rock that they want to. And so the metaverse presents a new way for people to invest in a virtual piece of the rock. Right? Good so far?
Yeah, good.
Cool. Just want to make sure. All right, just want to make sure, because I remember there were days at Harrison College when you're sitting in class and the teacher don't stop. That's why your Cape grades weren't so great. So just continuing on from here. Now, is it something that we need to pay attention to, right? Because you can know that it exists and just be fine. And I would say it definitely is. One thing to note is that very recently, Microsoft jumped onto the Metaverse bandwagon. They purchased Activision Blizzard, which some of you may know the game World of Warcraft, but Activision is a massive gaming company. And they create these digital virtual worlds. And Microsoft, either this year or late last year, finished purchasing them for $69 billion, which was one of the largest purchase events of a technology company. And Meta, of course, they renamed themselves to Meta in honor of this metaverse, understanding what metaverse is. So the joke here in this photo is that Apple is now trying to catch up. And there's so many rumors that Apple is trying to create their own virtual headset to compete with Microsoft's HoloLens, which is another way to get into metaverse, and Facebook's Oculus. So they're now trying to catch up with the bandwagon. But jokes aside, if the three biggest companies in the world, all of which have more than $1 trillion in valuation, I believe Facebook might be reaching $1 trillion, then even if we're not going to be gung-ho about it, it should be something we at least understand what it is. Right? There's no way at the end of this presentation, all of us will know all about the metaverse. It's still expanding, right? It is a concept that is expanding, but it's also being implemented by multiple companies daily. But what we do need to understand is what it is, right? Enough that we can hold a conversation with somebody when they ask, what is the metaverse and how do I get in? So just looking at a couple of platforms that do exist, the idea of the metaverse is one that is tied in with a concept called Web3. I'm not sure if that's a familiar concept here, but just to go over it very briefly. Web3 is a new vision of the web, where instead of items or instead of hosting, instead of services being provided in a centralized manner, where there's one person who has the ability to turn on or turn off your servers, everything is moved to a decentralized way of accessing it. So how that looks in real life is before you might log into AWS, set up your web hosting, set up your DNS, set up your security, and everything is managed on AWS's servers. And you feel confident because AWS is robust. Like, when has AWS ever gone down? Now, the new idea is, why not take the power away from AWS and give it to all of your users? And so instead of hosting your website in one place or on one server or one company, you move it into the computers of all of the persons who visit your website. And so a piece of your website or a replica of your website is on all of these machines. And it's a concept called a DApp, or a decentralized application, DAPP. Now, currently the metaverse is not in line with Web3, because what's going on right now is not beneficial in the decentralized sense. I'll explain why I mean. These companies that you see on the screen here are actually all private companies. They're all centralized and they're all owned by big corporations rather than that decentralized idea. And so the one in the top left is one of the most popular ones called Decentraland. You can log in, create your avatar. You can also own property. You can also build property. All of that goes on in Decentraland. The next thing under that is the Sandbox, which is a competitor to the Decentraland. And these companies they're not indie in the size of what they are, but they're not massive corporations. They are focused only on creating these metaverses that people can access. Under this, the third image that you have here is Horizon Worlds. That belongs to Facebook. That is their metaverse platform where you can, again, create your avatar, join online, interact with other people. And the one on the right-hand side here with the Beijing flag is IBM's metaverse, right? Big IBM. And like I said, these are old concepts. If you're sharp, you realize that in the top right corner of this IBM screenshot, this is either running on a virtual server or it's running on Windows XP from many, many years ago. Just to show you that this is an aged concept that's now getting new zeal or a new name. So that's the metaverse, right? So what next? What happens with the metaverse? Because we've heard of fancy terms before. We've been hearing about fancy terms. But what is going to move this into something that is mainstream? Where I believe the metaverse is right now on this technology adoption life cycle is in the early adopters phase, right? And I'll explain the difference between each phase. Innovators, which is like a small percentage of the users of a technology, are the persons that Google or Bing or go out and search for new technology and make sure that they are first to use it. They're actually proud to tell their friends, hey, I found this new technology that you've never heard of. And these people are the people that will go out and seek technology and make use of it before anyone else has even heard about it. Now, when a technology passes the stage of being used by gets into the hands of early adopters are not necessarily looking for the software, but the software has been put in their laps. And the difference between them and early majority is early adopters don't mind if the software is buggy. They don't mind if it doesn't work 100% of the time. If it works 80% of the time, or even 75% of the time, they're happy. And early adopters are fine making use of this software and documenting it, writing blog posts about it, making videos about it. And these are persons that you can find your tribe, right? The tribe of the persons who are supporting the metaverse. But for any technology to get into mainstream, which is this green section at the end, then what has to happen is that it needs to cross the chasm. It needs to go between the persons who are so zealous and gung-ho about the technology to those who are really seeing the value of it and who are not necessarily excited about it, but see the value enough to sign up. All right, so one of the ways that I figured might be easy to get an understanding of the metaverse, or a good analogy, is financial services. I'll explain why. Right now, financial services is a very hot topic in Jamaica because we have an issue right now where the banks are actually charging fees. They've just introduced fees for many of the accounts that people have. And people are angry because it's come out like a surprise, like, hey, Happy New Year, here's a fee on every transfer that you do and receive. Here's a fee for keeping the account with us. We hope you love us. Continue to do business with us. And because of that, people are getting a little less, a little less excited about financial services because of this, what seems like a betrayal. But if you look at it from all angles, you realize that what's happening is the banks are now making back the money that they've lost after so many months of a moratorium during COVID. You see, these banks still need to make money. And after putting off loan collections for so long, they're now finding new ways to get the service back, to pay their team, to pay their employees. But it's not seen that way by the general public. Now, how does that tie in? Right now, in Jamaica, there are 17% of adults that are unbanked, right? So that means pretty much 1 in 5 persons in Jamaica that are adults do not have an account with a financial institution, whether a bank, a credit union, or a financial services company. And that means that so many people, whether because of distrust or whether because of just no care for opening these accounts or no knowledge of how to open it, are in a very vulnerable situation. In fact, just this week, there was an article about someone who had $10 million under her bed. She was a vendor. Mind you, 10 million Jamaican dollars, just to clarify. And it got stolen. And of course, it went into the news, and people were like, why you have $10 million under your bed? What are you selling? What are you selling? But the thing is, this is still something that happens. You hear about it, and you say, oh, people are holding money in their mattress. It's actually happening. And $10 million, even though it's in Jamaican dollars, it's not a small amount of money. And that comes from, generally, a lack of trust to the financial institutions and also a lack of understanding of the product itself. That is pretty much the case with the metaverse right now. And so one of the things that came about recently is a new application that's been launched in Jamaica, Link. Now, Link is a mobile wallet. It allows persons to detach themselves from the bank in that you can store money in this wallet without having any tie to a bank. right? It's a wallet in the very traditional sense where, and many of you would be familiar with mobile wallets, but it doesn't need to be linked to a bank for you to access cash. Just like give me cash in my hand and put it into my wallet, it's the same concept. And so this is a new way for people to access financial services without the thought in the back of their head that they're now working with a bank and banks can't be trusted, or that this is a complex solution that will in the end be bad for them. Right? And this is a very similar concept to the metaverse right now. So there was a lovely slide here. But let me just describe it. In that right now, what we are facing is the question about the metaverse of how do we move forward with it? Like why is it something that we need to look at moving forward? And the question that really comes to mind, let me see if I can find the slide, is friend or foe, right? Is the metaverse going to be a place that is safe for us to use, something that we can make use of and prosper, or is it going to be something that is negative in all of our lives? And as Dwight mentioned earlier, I had also seen the article about the lady that was gang raped in the metaverse. And I was listening to it, and it reminded me that the metaverse doesn't change who people are. It just becomes an extension of how they are. And it's just another way for them to act. So when thinking about the metaverse, it's impossible to think about the benefits and the growth of the metaverse as it goes into the mainstream without thinking about how we police the metaverse. And as you all know, police and policy are coming from the same root word. So the first question is, in terms of policies and how the metaverse runs, are there going to be policies to protect persons or prohibit them from actions? Right? How are people going to perceive policies that are set up in the metaverse? What is the motivation behind these policies? Is it going to be a policy that seems to be driven by greed, or is it going to be something that is less, is more altruistic? People are going to ask the question, what are these policies really being built behind? And then the last part is data control over data monitoring. So is it that your data is going to be less private, or is it that you're being protected by people being able to track your data, track your usage of the metaverse? And all of these are concepts that have not fully been ironed out because the metaverse is new. Now, we in the Caribbean are policy experts, sometimes so much so that we have too many policies to progress. But we are very good at coming up with policies. And this is one area that I think that we can definitely move forward in, especially as the metaverse is forming, to look at how the metaverse can be used in a way that's beneficial for all. When you're designing these spaces, it's going to be important to consider persons of all ages and all stages, because as more people go online, the concept of them being protected has to be at the forefront of policymakers' minds. And so this is where I'm going to end, because the goal here is that as a region, as a nation, as a region, we understand enough about the metaverse to be educated on it. Like I said, what's separating us right now, or what will separate us, is that education, just like the financial services. It's the understanding of what the metaverse is, how it can be used, and then how we can benefit from it. Right now, the metaverse is burgeoning. There's a lot going on in it. In fact, recently, the largest property sale in the metaverse happened, which was $4.3 million in Ethereum, a cryptocurrency. And what's happening is people are actually buying plots of land in the metaverse to build up their property as an asset or a store of wealth. And that is something that is still growing. And so I say this to say this is early stages. This should not be like the time when Bitcoin just came out. And many of us missed the train because we were too practical on it, sorry. And we said, boy, this is not for us. And I have a personal story on that I'll share if I have time at the end of it. But this should not be a time where we miss the train because of skepticism. But instead, this should be a time where we capitalize on this new burgeoning market, where you can own property in the metaverse, you can advertise in the metaverse, you can get on the metaverse and become an influencer. and cause big change in a growing market. So thank you very much, Lloyd, for this time. I know that you're going to go. You do have a question and answer section at the end, but this is pretty much what I wanted to discuss about the metaverse. And like I said, the definition has probably changed since I started, but I do think it's a very interesting space and a very exciting opportunity for those who see where the opportunity lies.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it. That's a very engaging presentation in terms of presenting the metaverse in a all-encompassing summary on a whole. I think we probably open up for questions in case anybody have any questions for Chris. You can kind of jump in here and ask any questions as we go through, and ask any particular questions we have on security, development, maturity on the metaverse itself, different iterations, how do you hedge your bets on which metaverse will be successful, whether or not you actually spend that 4 million in Ethereum in the wrong metaverse as an investment. Who knows? So, any questions?
So Dwight, you hit on it the nail on the head there, saying that there are multiple metaverses and you're investing in each of these or properties or whatever. How do you know which one you're wasting money on, so to speak?
That's like so I'll answer that from a web development perspective and then tie it back. I'll tie it back carefully. We as a company here, we focus on developing websites or web properties on Wix. And we chose Wix, which is a web building platform, 4 or 5 years ago because not only was it something that we could get to our solution on, but we noticed that they kept on listening to customers and innovating, listening to customers and innovating. And it's paid off for us because we've continued to be able to offer more and do more because of the platform that we chose to build on from back then. I believe it's going to be the very same thing with the metaverse. Speculative, and there's so many different options. There's the Sandbox, Decentraland, Horizon Worlds. It's going to be important to watch carefully how they update their systems, how they manage their servers, how they continue to listen to customers, listen to their users, and then continue to build features that add value. That is how you're going to know which one is the better one to choose. Will you know off the bat that this is the perfect one? No. Is it still speculative? Yes. In fact, the thing that should be known about the metaverse is that unlike physical land, where we know the price is fixed or it goes up because land is fixed, and once there's scarcity, the price will increase because demand will increase, but supply is not increasing. That is why land is getting more expensive. But land that gets more expensive in the metaverse, like that $4.3 million property, is all speculative and it is all pixels. And so if the developer of Decentraland decides, you know what, we're going to create another 1 million square acres or hectares, there's nothing to stop them. And so your investment suddenly goes down. So at the end of the day, is it speculative? Yes. Will you know off the bat that this is the better one? No. But in your choice, look at the one that's listening to customers and the one that is improving their features, the speed of their servers, the ease of signing up, as the one that you can then make an investment in. As my team would say, not financial advice, definitely not financial advice, but that would be how I go about making that decision.
So this embassy that Barbados is supposedly doing, they're investing in multiple metaverses and they have to buy property and potentially waste taxpayers' money?
Potentially. Well, it depends. What's the question?
No, I'm just trying to understand. So this that there, I can't remember whoever spoke about it however long ago. I wasn't paying too much attention to it, to be honest. They are investing in multiple metaverses. That's the first question.
I'm not sure if it's multiple metaverses, but I know at least one of them they're investing in.
Yeah, this was quite insane to me. Anyhow, all right, thanks.
No problem.
I have a, I guess I'm on the same wavelength as Brian. I don't know if I don't want to call us the older generation, Brian, but at least the generation that could still understand, we were children when there was the internet, sort of, teenagers, and we still knew a world where there was not one, where the value proposition, what you invest in and what you put your time and energy in is tangible to some extent. Now, taking it to today, where I have anybody who has kids or is around kids, has nephews and nieces, would understand that they play these, like you said, there's Roblox, there are all these different games that kids are completely immersed in. So when my 12-year-old son comes to me and says, "Daddy, I need $50 because I really need the shield, for his game," I have to pause and I have to ask him, okay, how far does this go for you? If you continue to ask for actual legal tender that I could go down to the store and buy food with and eat, so that your avatar can eat, so to speak, in the game, I just have a hard time for me valuing the $50 the same way he does.
Yeah, it's insane.
So what I'm saying is, if I enable that behavior, I think as a parent, then he might grow up to be a child or to be a young adult who would rather sit down and pour his hard-earned money fixing his virtual Mercedes-Benz online. Because if he doesn't fix it, he can't carry out his virtual girlfriend. I mean, where does it end? I struggle. I really, really struggle with the value proposition. So that's my comment.
I definitely understand it. To add a comment rather than an answer, one of the concepts that people are differentiating the metaverse with, from like a gaming reality, is the ability to get those assets, like let's call it the coins or whatever the coins are in that metaverse, and be able to use them either in other metaverses or in real life.
I'd like to comment on the whole concept of virtual. I think for me, we tend to get caught up in the concept that, or we tend to scoff at the idea that someone treats something online, which is, when it boils down, it's just bits and bytes or pixels, as Chris 2.0 says. Why would we scoff at people treating these things with value, or assigning value to these things? But the reality is, we've done that to many other things that are intangibles. The simple fact that people buy stocks and bonds that they can never touch, and even if they can touch a certificate, that certificate itself is worth nothing. It's really the value that is assigned to this virtual pieces of a company that they own. And what makes it, I believe, more significant is depending on which side of the coin you are. Because if you can create a virtual item that not only you but other people assign value to, and you can increase the value of that item and then sell it, then the proposition becomes a lot more palatable for you, because you have now been able to, you personally have now been able to gain something in terms of value from a virtual fictitious transaction or object that doesn't really exist. And in the same way, we're talking about monetary value. But when you sit at a computer and you play a game that gives you pleasure from the game playing itself or playing with others, interacting in a virtual space, the value to you may be different to the value that someone else assigns to it. So obviously, if Francois' son wants to buy a virtual Mercedes-Benz for a couple $100,000, that may be a little above the value threshold that Francois appreciates. But if Francois could see that he buys it for $100,000, but later on is able to sell it to either his or somebody else's virtual girlfriend for $200,000, then the value proposition immediately appreciates. So I say all that to say that this whole concept requires a mind shift, and it requires you to place yourself in a different world, a different place to where you are today, because again, we heard I think we would appreciate that the digital generation, it would be more au fait, more easily swayed by this compared to the older generation of millennials and the older ones, who our world is made of very tangible things. So I just wanted to offer that contribution.
Thanks, Chris. Obviously what you're saying, I understand, but your last point when you're talking about this generation easily swayed, in my head, it's more like they're being bamboozled. I just can't. I don't know. I will need a huge mind shift to be able to be completely comfortable with where this is going. Just seeing how my son interacts online, I guess being forced online. This is how he interacts with his friends, and he gets so immersed in these worlds that he might not even ask for lunch or dinner unless I say, Isaac, food is on the table, and I just, something there that to me is, it's the addictive nature of it. And then not addictive with your time, but then daddy, give me $100 so I can continue to grow my virtual world. No, come and spend some time. I just, sorry, I'm rambling. Y'all continue with the meeting, please.
No,
It sounds like you're not going to be buying land anytime soon, Francois.
It sounds that way, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm totally not convinced. But
Francois, so I don't know if you did it when you were younger, but I used to take money, put it into a device, and play Pac-Man. And I used to ask my parents for money to go to the arcade to put it into a device to play Pac-Man.
Yeah, I did that too. Arcade games are the best games, but
there you go. So I see this as a no. Don't get me wrong. I like you can't. If my son asks me to help invest in his land in the metaverse, I can think about 3, 4, or 5 times.
Right.
So I'm not too far away from you, but I accept that my mind shift has not taken place, and I'm on a different side of the coin where me putting my money into the metaverse, today the value that I would get personally, I can't rationalize why I would spend my money there.
Right. Fair enough.
So Chris 2.0, thanks for the presentation. I do have a few as I say, a few follow-on questions. First and foremost, yeah, which metaverse do you know that where is Barbados's embassy? Where have they set up?
Which one they've chosen. The flag that I showed you was from the IBM Metaverse, but I don't think that's the one that they actually built it in.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to check which one it was.
When I first started reading about it, they were talking about Decentraland. I believe that
Decentraland.
may be where they are.
Yeah, that one is the biggest one right now.
Yeah. And what about Super World?
Is a new one to me.
New.
That's
Oh.
back a big company.
Yeah, they apparently are also doing the so that's what I wanted to clarify. So for those who are, as you say, selling this real estate and land, are we talking about any company being able to map, the entire physical world as we know it now, and put their own, what do you call it, their own financial model with regards to that, and then sell that back?
To be clear, when you say map, you mean make a digital representation of Earth as we have it now?
Yeah. So I suppose my question would be if Decentraland, Sandbox, and this new guy, Super World, all said, "Yep, we're mapping the Caribbean." Everybody would be able to say, as you say, in my metaverse, you can buy a piece of the rock in Barbados, and in my metaverse, you can buy it. In my metaverse, it's $10. It's 1 Ethereum. In my metaverse, it's 0.5 Ethereum, etc., etc. Is that feasible at the present time?
So they absolutely can. It's not feasible. It wouldn't make sense.
Okay.
And I'll explain why. So what Decentraland is doing now is very similar to that. Still hear me?
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool. So what Decentraland is doing and the Sandbox is doing is very similar to that, where the primary real estate would be the real estate in the metaverse. Just like we would have it here, and the houses in the hills cost more. They're doing the same thing in the metaverse. But the argument that the person who's buying the property have, and it's a very reasonable argument, is if I can click a button and teleport between here and the hilltop, then what is the real value of that property costing more than where I am now?
Yep.
Right? It's the full value. It's not actual value to build on the hilltop. So why is the land more expensive? So they don't have a benefit per se to have it modeled. Unless it's sentimental, people might just want to buy a digital piece of the rock. I can definitely see that happening. But there's no real incentive to have that hilltop versus valley location when the people are not so enthused to buy the hilltop pricing because it's not really hilltop. But the properties that are being sold, besides that $4.3 million, which was used for a house, are digital malls as well. And the persons that are buying either the mall itself in this digital world or stores in the mall are really companies that want their brand to be in the eyes of their actual consumers. Because if their consumers are in this central land for however many hours, right, that's their touch point with their customer now. So they want to make sure their brand is represented well, so that when they come out of the metaverse, they have that recall there.
They have that connection. Yeah. All right, and I think all right. So I think that addresses that question. In a discussion that I was in recently as well, there was this talk of what do they call it? Layering. So and from the financial aspect, whereas let's say Sandy Lane, for example. So as I say, somebody has bought that location within a particular metaverse, whichever one, the Centerland, and they bought the whole Sandy Lane property. However, they don't have, others would still be able to come in and put material there and post their own information on that same location, on that same physical location. And what's that connection? Or does somebody say, yes, I own Sandy Lane. You want to come and put a virtual golf course on top here? All right, I'm going to charge you, as I say, 5 Ethereum to do so.
All right. So the question is, what's the connection? So that's going to come down also to the platform that you build on.
Okay.
Meaning that when that's going to be a feature that they have to develop to make sure that you have what could be called a digital deed, and that would allow persons to sublet parts of their land. But all of that has to be built into each of these metaverses.
Yeah.
So it is possible, but that goes back to me saying, look for the one that's innovating the fastest, because those are features that will make one metaverse more valuable than another.
Yeah.
I use that term metaverse loosely.
Yep. All right. Thanks.
But I look forward to seeing your first property.
Yeah, I will tell you that definitely I am looking around for just that, for the right metaverse to invest in, but I will be buying property this year. Hopefully in the next few months.
I do have a question for you all.
So Francois and Christina, I'll invite you over.
Sure, no problem. No, I'm not. Listen,
I'll be coming.
I learned my lesson, and I know my son didn't tell you all. He didn't share the story about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But it was in this group that the Bitcoin discussion started when Gabriel came and he made a presentation to us. And I distinctly remember, although my memory may not be totally correct, where he said, "Hey guys, you need to invest." I think the price was like 300 US at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys.
Just under 400.
Right.
I took out my credit card, and my wife is like, "What are you doing?"
I remember Jason saying that he was jumping in, and I was like, I got my few coppers. Why I can waste it on this foolishness? And if I had bought it at that time, the little piece that I gave to you would have been a lot more valuable. Because I mean, look where it is now, So, Greg, once you line up and you can help assure us doubters, we can jump on the bandwagon with you.
All right. I'll let you know. Sandy Lane is up on the list. Trust me.
All right.
And just a small anecdote, because I'm on the other side of that. Even though I'm the younger one, and society tells me I should be the more tech savvy, more less risk averse person. I remember I think I was here in Jamaica. It might have been 2015, and when my dad bought 0.03 Bitcoin at the time, he gave me and my sister 0.003, and it was worth like probably 70 Bajan at the time. I can't remember the full amount. But I remember that it had gone up probably 4 times in value to about 300 Bajan. And I needed something. At that time, it meant life and death, but it really obviously didn't. And so I needed to get some cash, probably for a laptop. And he offered to buy it back for me. And I'm like, sure, of course. I mean, I'm already making 4 times the value, and who's winning here? Me, of course. And then, of course, the next year, Bitcoin went up to 16,000 plus. So I've learned from that at the very least, I need to understand what's going on in the space, just so that at the very least, I can make an informed decision. I don't have to be gung ho into it, but I do need to know at least what's going on. So my father can't catch me again.
All right. So, Chris 2.0, my question is in terms of, we all security personnel here, in terms of, well, most of us, I should say, in terms of the metaverse and the current standing now, I don't want to reference the rape case in terms of metaverse again, that's a worst case scenario. But in terms of if we can't police as simple as applications like Facebook and Instagram properly and TikTok in terms of protecting people and children on a how can we properly protect an entire universe, which is digital in terms of, you may have property, but let's say people could still have property stolen virtually. You may still have trespassers on your property as well too. How do you properly manage all the things that you typically have to do in a physical space in a digital one within the metaverse? And as you mentioned, in terms of which metaverse is evolving the fastest and adopting more to the needs of customers. How do you properly do that? And what steps are they taking now to ensure that if you actually have digital property or live in the metaverse on a whole, you are protected in some way and not being left out in terms of being subject to anything that is typically otherwise considered a crime in the real world?
Yeah, very simply, I have no idea, completely none. But I do know that we need to do it, and I do know that we'll figure it out. In terms of technologies that can help, I mean, that's a great question. Off the top of my head, I know that having a decentralized system in terms of how things are stored on the metaverse, like transactions, purchases of property, using things like smart contracts that Ethereum uses will help. But that is exactly the opportunity that I see us having, because it's a problem that hasn't been solved, and that's how you build a company. So I would actually ask ladies and gentlemen in this group, how can we approach it?
I think, it's as is now, the metaverse is generally open. It's basically free to sign up and join, of course, right? But then, similar to how you have taxes and social security, you're gonna need that system within which you can have persons that can police the metaverse internally, and of course, you then pay a fee, right? I think for now, most metaverses are pushing to have early adoption and make it as free and cheap as possible for persons to come in and limit your cost to only you buying property or making transactions within the space and make it easy for overall for persons to kind of just be within it. But you're gonna need that infrastructure in terms of the management and policing and structure on a whole to ensure that that kind of protection is afforded to everyone once they're within the space. I mean, I can remember starting the game back when I was in college and I was playing online gaming, and it was some unsavory conversation sometimes in terms of being in a online gaming environment. And I think that's basically continuing now in terms of some pretty toxic conversations taking place in an online space on a whole, whether it's in text or actual real life conversation. So having to weed through that or actually having a way to police it such that your experience on the whole is more pleasant and not necessarily subject to the persons who are there being unscrupulous, being aggressive, being overly just not good citizens in the digital space. Give persons a chance to have a wholesome experience in the metaverse and not be subject to, as I mentioned before, the worst bottom of the barrel persons who are just literally out there to explore digital space, enjoy it like the wild wild west, and do anything that they could do because to them it's free range. There's no repercussions. Worst case scenario, their account gets deleted and they create a new one. So how do you then create that environment where persons could actually feel the repercussions of being an idiot in the room, being aggressive, literally committing digital crime, and face repercussions as a result of it? I think that's a tough situation and a tough one to solve on a whole for these environments.
Definitely want to hear other people jump in, but from what you said, what stood out to me is that we need a way to track identity.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Dwight. I will. Sorry. Let me turn back on my camera. Hi, Chris. Great presentation. First of all. Okay. I will state to your comment. Regarding. I guess crime. to me that comes in the same realm as cyberbullying. And if you're gonna go in the metaverse and you have an avatar and let's say you use an abusive language or whatever the case is committing a crime. Right now, as it stands, in most cases, cyberbullying is not illegal. So I think bridging the gap where you have some sort of repercussion for cyberbullying, I think that will translate maybe into some I don't know, legislation or some legal action for something like that. I don't know if Francois will be able to expand more on that, but I think for something like that, cyberbullying itself would have to be illegal for it to then be, I guess, what's the word? Something you can get prosecuted for as an action in the metaverse.
I would absolutely agree. I to make sure that however we do it, because it sounds like we might actually draft a policy here tonight, but however we do it, there needs to be a way to identify who that bully is, whether they drop off the platform and go onto another one, or whether they create a new account to pretend to be someone else.
But I find the policing aspect really important. But at the end of the day, it's a platform owned by one company, which probably is registered in one country. So Decentraland, I don't know who owns them, but I assume it's one company. They might be in the US or England or whatever. So the jurisdiction will fall to that. I don't think that the Barbados laws can, say for example, protect Barbadians. The way I see it, whoever owns the platform, depending on what country they're registered in, those are the laws that probably will apply. So if you go in the central land and you go to the Barbados embassy and you commit a crime, which is a crime in Barbados, but not in the country that the central land is registered, there's nothing we can do really. Because there's not going to be any sort of mapping of Barbados laws to Barbados real estate in the metaverse. The platform will still belong to one country, and the laws of the countries. That, to my mind, that's what's going to matter.
All right, just to I guess stir up that thought. That is a similar concept that we have in web development with domain purchases, because as you know, domains are, and this is web domains, are either owned by organizations, nonprofits, or they're with the country states. But yet there's a parent body that manages how it goes on. And so they don't have access to the domain of the database of who owns the domains, but they do have the ability to give guidelines on how domains are purchased and used, being IANA. So what do you think then, David, about, even though these are private companies with private databases of users, them having parent organization that does the overall policy?
Something like that would be good for the users, but how do you make the platform do it? Like for example, how do you get it? What was Facebook? How do you tell them, let's do what is good for people? I am not sure how legally or any other way that you'd have enough influence to convince them to.
Yeah. I think we lost David.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we get any question on the
Yeah,
whole?
but one of the things, as I was listening to the last bit of discussions, is at the end of the day, all of this resides on somebody's server, and when you turn off the lights, all of it goes away. You know, so the amount of investment that goes into it how do you protect it? Ultimately, there's no I can't see at this stage any international laws or regulations coming into play within the metaverses. So anybody going into this is really at the mercy of the either a common agreement to behave a certain way, or as well as the ethics and so on of the owner of that that metaverse. Worse yet, if they're going to create algorithms to peddle advertisements and so on, then you're back to Facebook and the rules that govern the profitability of these large organizations. So it's a very we can talk about what is good practice, what is moral, but when it comes to, I believe that when it comes to this, I keep saying decentralized, but when it comes to metaverse, you are basically you playing by the rules of whichever individual organization sets up their metaverse.
Question. Is there any metaverse represented at United Nations? Are there like the United Nations is made up of countries? Does the metaverse have a seat in that forum as yet? That's my question.
At the UN?
Yeah, the UN.
Not as far as I've seen. In terms of representation, Barbados is actually leading in terms of that digital metaverse representation of the embassy, and we are leading. That's why I said that as a region we have no excuse in this case, because we have the leg up. But I haven't seen anything to say that there's a representative at the UN for the metaverse, and it would be hard to do because it can't represent itself as a nation, if I understand what you're saying, because it is not a nation.
So what rules govern this particular space? Is there another frontier of lawlessness? If there are no laws.
Right. So each metaverse actually has the same way we have terms and conditions when we sign up for a website or when we visit a website. Each metaverse has a set of guidelines that you have to sign up for that metaverse. That's their rule book. And so you agree to that when you sign up. That would be your set of laws. And of course, if you break the laws in the metaverse, you get the fair punishment that would have been in those laws. But who is governing the laws is another question, because it goes back to the owner of the server.
Right, that comes down to enforceability. Just like the plain old physical world. Because we have a lot of laws in the physical world, but they're not really enforced. So therefore, that is the problem. And that's just my two questions.
Chris, sorry, Julian here. Has there been any talk about interoperability across these different metaverse platforms?
There has been in terms of shared avatars, so the persona, as well as more so on the shared token side. Meaning what you earn in one metaverse can be spent in another. And that there is talk about how that would actually work when there are these private companies.
Okay.
It's going to go back to, like, I wasn't joking when I said the definition might change by the end of this, because there are competing definitions of whether there is a metaverse, which is the collection of all metaverses.
Yeah.
And the word metaverse itself, meta meaning beyond, verse meaning universe. So beyond our universe. Is it one big metaverse that is beyond our physical universe? Or is it multiple owned metaverses? So depending on why I said that is depending on how that is viewed, that's going to change whether there's a shared token or a shared payment method, or if it stays in a silo. And then there's probably a foreign exchange company to be started in this. Actually, that's a great idea. A foreign exchange company to be started in this to do trades between Sandbox currency and decentralized currency.
And you just touched on that. So I wasn't even thinking that way. From a currency point of view, each of these individual metaversi at the present time have their own currency versus me walking with as you say, a digital wallet with standard cryptocurrency.
As far as I know, yes. I know there are metaverses that have their own. They're not using global crypto. They're using their own crypto or their own token.
Wow. Okay. All right. Yes, indeed. It's going to get very, very interesting. Thanks.
Hey.
I have a question. Does this like benefit society in any way, or is it just a way for tech companies to sell advertisement and get richer?
And to take money from Mike's son, and then to take real money from my son, put it into a game with fake money, and then take real money back out on the other end. That's what this is.
I think what Francois means.
Sorry about that.
I think Francois means to take real money from him to give to his son.
No, thank you. You know, when you hear about all of these challenges, sometimes when you're trying to make sense out of nonsense, it is confusing like this. I just trying to make a round peg go into a square hole, or the other way around. But that's just how it seems to me. This seems like something that isn't well thought out. Like you said, you can't even get the definition correct because when you say it is contradicting itself. I think it's gonna burst when people realize, okay, well, this really ain't making a sense. We can't formalize this process, and the tech company is just gonna cream money out of people that don't know any better. But anyway.
And just like money, it is a tool. So is it one or the other? It can't be one or the other. It has to be however it is used. It really depends on who provisions it. For example, if you decided to create a metaverse now that you're focusing on persons who have disabilities, and these persons in your metaverse are able to interact with others in a way that they can't currently. If they can enter your metaverse, go to the revenue authority, renew their license, pay with Barbados cryptocurrency or Barbados CBDC, and get that done online in a way that feels interactive and is better than typing in on a website, then you are helping society. And that is because you have designed it to help society. No matter what you design, there will be people who misuse it, but it is a tool. The metaverse is to be a tool of however the person wants to use it. There will be advertising platforms and tech companies that use it for advertising, 100%. 100%, there will be.
Is that any different from just going online and paying via website?
Say one
Yes.
more time, Alex.
How is that any different from going to the website itself and paying with a credit card? Why do you have to go through the metaverse? Why do you have to use a cryptocurrency? Why can't you just pay directly from your wallet?
That's a good question, and you asked it the same way 3 times. Why do you have? Why do you have? Why do you have? I would answer.
Question.
It might not be have, it might be
Being
want.
able to ascertain that the ABM is treating the
Less
return
about
in as a normal
have to
deposit,
do it, more about want to do
and
it that way.
is there a configuration change required to avoid?
Chris, you need to mute your camera.
Chris 1.0.
Mute your audio. Yeah.
Senior, okay.
Yeah, I do believe it's going to become a case of want versus have to do it. There will always be the option to revenue authority walk in, stand in line. There will be the option eventually to pay for everything online. But this would be another way that you can use if you want to. And I 100% know there are people who will put on their headset, their Oculus headset, and simulate the walk and pay quickly and get in and out. Because it would be more of a want, especially if they are hindered from actually walking in real life. Then this could be something to give that feel again. So it's not really a question of have to. Why do you have to do this? It's more of an option to do it.
I agree. I think a challenge, it will spur another set of obsessions, because people who may not like their real life may more want to spend more time in a augmented reality, which to them may feel more fulfilling than their actual lives. The X amount of movies I can think of off the top of my head where this premise has been visited in an artistic form already, but the possibility of it happening in real life would be very, very strong, especially if you're a person who is not physically able, but in another reality that seems real to you, you can walk, skip, and jump and do all the things you can do in real life. And we just have to be cognizant that as we create the technology, we don't swap one problem for another problem. I can think of Inception, where it comes to mind, where people have more of fulfilling life in a dream world than in a real world. So, we got to look at all these sides and see that we may not be crippling another generation of people where real life is not satisfying and only a virtual life will be enough. And reality should be enough as opposed to a virtual life. We just need to take a bit of care of that. And right now we see the effects of gaming on our young people already. And now when you add augmented reality and being able to live a life seemingly purposefully in a virtual world, you just have to take care. And we as technologists or whatever, we just have to be able to caution parents and adults and millennials that the real world is worth saving, and hiding in a virtual world is not the answer. That's me.
But I think you're saying the same thing we've been saying for years. Saying no to drugs, but you can't stop people from wanting that escape. I mean, you can probably say logically it doesn't make sense, and the real problems will be there after the drugs will resolve. But you can't stop people from wanting to be distracted. Like today, a lot of young people have a problem with their body image, partly because of social media. But if you can give them an avatar and they think that their nose is too big or their skin is too dark or their hair is too kinky, they can change all of that with this and be happy. And we might say, well, that's not the real world. But if they're happy, we really can't tell them no.
Yeah.
I mean, huh?
Sorry, go ahead, David.
There are also advantages. I mean, like sometimes you go into a government office to do business and the person being real ridiculous. In the real world, you cannot slap them across the head. But in the metaverse, you might be able to.
David.
Yeah, I think the angle that when Chris responded, the metaverse is a tool, and it's all on how you use it. It's the similar. I take it the similar way as you see guns. Uh, a gun could be used. Yeah, it kills, but it depends on how you use it. So as in all things, a tool could be good or bad. It comes down to the person behind the screen using it. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to how the technology is leveraged. Well, the intent behind the technology, how they're leveraging the technology, that is. My question would be from I guess, an analyst slash auditing standpoint. If businesses are going to be pouring their uh, finances into this, how would we, I guess, as defenders, be able to analyze the data going through, I guess, the metaverse and the meta plane, rather, um, in order to actually defend it properly as this technology grows? Because as you said, in the life cycle is in the early adoption stage. So how would we be able to, defend our audit? That's my question in a nutshell.
I think there are a lot of opportunities for that. I mean, it's very new. So if some group or foundation decided to say, look at security in the metaverse, I think it'd be great fun. And at the end of the day, you may not get that far initially, but eventually, because a lot of people are working on the problem, we'll find some sort of solutions. But it'd be for a group to decide this is something that needs to be done. Let's just get to it. It's uncharted territory. Nobody's an expert in it, but we're just going to put a whole set of heads together and we're going to work on it, and eventually we'll come up with something. I think that'd be a great idea.
Agree. The only thing I disagree with, David, is when you said if some group could do it, because why can't this group?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. You were breaking up.
Yeah, I was saying the only thing I didn't agree with David is when he said if some group could do it, because why can't it be this group of people?
It could be any group. Because no one is an expert right now, so anyone can come in now and just we had the same thing with the AI and blockchain and thing. When they started, there were no experts in securing them, but people had to sit down and work on it and try things, and eventually they got. I mean, it's still not mature, but unless a group sits down and say, "Let's tackle this brand new problem," we're not going to get it done.
Exactly.
I'll go another level deeper, and I think question should be, why wasn't security baked in to this technology from its initial stages? I mean, from the time avatars were a thing.
Was it
And why is
ever
it no?
baked into any big? Sorry, chat. Was it baked into social media? Facebook started with the
Exactly.
premise that privacy is not important.
Okay,
And
take your point.
Facebook blockchain
Not
started without the security either.
so did
You
operating
look at
systems.
money. Yeah.
When they did that, it was not security that was the focus of MS-DOS or the first Linux. They had security versions afterwards, but
Like
it's functional.
TCP/IP was actually used by the army, but security was never built into it. You assume that everybody was trustworthy. So you don't start these things with security, Chad. You
Yeah,
start looking
apparently.
to solve a problem or make money. Those are the only two considerations: solve a problem or make money.
Right. Which brings me to my question. In terms of the money element of this, I don't think there'll be much policing of the metaverse and metaverses until there's a strong money element that can't be regulated or monitored, and the taxman can't get his cut. So in terms of the metaverse on a whole, how much pressure or how much oversight is there among governments in terms of monitoring transactions in the metaverse, monitoring balances between persons in the metaverse, such that there's minimal risk of persons using the metaverse to send or exchange cash digitally when it's really there in the physical world they're actually transacting as part of that space, right? Is there some kind of monitoring allowed or configured in some metaverses such that they monitor for tax purposes or monitor the risk of any money laundering transactions as part of the metaverses?
From the motivation point, like, I would say that yes, when there's the biggest impetus comes when there's a big financial benefit, but we are very well into the age of open source where people are doing things in a very voluntary fashion. And there's open source in terms of development, yes, but there's also open source in terms of security, where you have big companies who have excess assets volunteering members of their teams to form these nonprofit groups. For example, IAM or the ETF or the Let's Encrypt group, which revolutionized SSL certificates. And I can't come on a security chat and talk about SSL certificates, but the fact that you can now get your SSL certificate, which is something you had to pay to do before, for free, because there's now one big verifying body, which is a nonprofit organization that allows everyone to have their verification done with that body. So I say that to say there's motivation beyond the taxman making his cut in this case. I believe that if the nonprofit group is formed that polices this because that's their goal, right? They're not making money from it. Their purpose is to police it. Then following that group of experts that's doing it voluntarily, you will see new policies come in place, the ability to track transactions on the platform. All of that will come even without the taxman getting his cut.
All right.
Yeah, and I mean, from the whole decentralized nature of it, and being away from current structures and institutions, I can't see the governments getting back involved as well. I think that's when it will head down the wrong path. But we'll see how all this work plays out.
It's very interesting to me, and
Yeah.
I do share. Anthony shared some of the same concerns that you do, in terms of people getting lost in the metaverse and calling that reality when that's not who they are. Meaning that's not their God-given person. That's the one that they choose for themselves. And we've never been very good at choosing the best for ourselves. To be very honest, that's what causes us to eat the fruit off the tree, right? So I definitely share that concern in terms of making sure that the metaverse is used as a tool for benefit, whether financial benefit, I believe that's important as well, but also social benefit. But the only way we can push that, I say we as in people who are on this call, is if we understand what it is from a basic level, so that when somebody comes to us with a question or a query in the metaverse or an idea, we can speak with knowledge and actually give a informed response on a direction that they can go. So I'm definitely encouraging everyone on the call, whether you're for it or not, to learn more about it so that you can then make an informed response when somebody asks you. And I do believe that this call could be the start of the foundation. If we as a nation are starting the first virtual embassy, then what's to stop us from starting the first virtual policy for these decentralized worlds? Nothing. Really nothing.
All right.
That's a very good point,
Yeah, I agree, Chris.
And the government may actually support that.
In terms of introducing the metaverse to the public, that's something that they might not be as easy to relate to, other than saying video games. I think the movie Ready Player One was pretty good in terms of showing the concept of a digital space that you could exist in, transact in, and all live in. Is there any other movies that you could relate to, probably refer to for persons who might not understand or be able to wrap their heads around what the metaverse is?
One came to mind, and it's something that I've seen consistently when I'm looking at the metaverse. Mm-hmm. Every other movie ends in the robots taking over the world in a blight. That's the problem. So,
Well, you need a happy ending, right? And that's part of it too. It's that's Hollywood. Yeah.
That is Hollywood. No other one comes to mind. But one thing in this area that I do believe is that kids are going to have a quicker grasp of it, especially those who are playing games like Roblox that was mentioned earlier, because they've been in the space that's turning into what is called the metaverse. One of the things that I do is I also co-lead a nonprofit called Youth Can Do IT, where we teach youth from 7 to 25 how to do web development and game development. And when you see the games that these kids are coming up with that between 7 and 11, it's like the concept that they're coming up with a cat flying through the air, shooting lasers out the eyes to get the cheese or whatever. The games are so well thought out. They have a storyline behind them because this is the space that they're in. And I say that to say that in use ourselves, kids are going to be very important in understanding, not necessarily leading right now, but in making heads or tails of why this would be beneficial.
Yeah. Well,
My concept for children is that if you have a space for children to exist in, the same way that that Fortnite has been difficult for parents to police and manage, and same thing for teachers as well too. They've had students come to class literally as zombies because they've been up until 2 o'clock in the morning playing Fortnite, and in some countries it's actually ruled as addictive. It's an addiction, right? So how do you manage a space where these children feel very comfortable, could transform and change themselves so much on a daily basis, use physical currency to buy upgrades and changes to their online avatar persona, and then literally have a space where they could explore, do lots of wild things, and have fun with their friends in a digital realm?
Yeah. I don't know. As I say, I think so Chris 2.0 has made the good point that there will be more questions and answers at this point in time. And the discussion will continue. But yes, getting more information so we can have more informed discussions around it, I think is key.
Do I have to declare my age, or does age matter in a metaverse? Because if I am a human being and I decide I am 20 and I may be physically 13, who are you to say that I am not 20? If everything is relative.
Isn't that social media right now today? I mean,
yeah.
Nothing different.
It's called catfishing. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Yes, catfishing.
Yeah, but seeing if Facebook figures out that you are underage, they probably can do something about it. But if in the metaverse, and we say, who's to say that everything does not go? If the rules are such that I can be whoever I want to be and anything I want to be, or you to tell me that I'm not? I just mean to say that everything must have some sort of rule of law, and it seems that the metaverse may not be that person. Notwithstanding terms and conditions, depends on how it's written, how people are being so flexible with things that we thought were absolutely like sex and gender and different things. It may be just another non-absolute thing, age.
Yeah.
Just to make a contribution with regard to one of the topics that I'm becoming very familiar with, and that is in order to implement a successful digital platform, you must have a very strong digital identity. And the only way that we can avoid some of these pitfalls where children go on and pretend to be adults and vice versa, and men pretend to be women and so on, is if you can have a digital identity that is a real digital identity that can define your identity in the platform. And today there are very few international standards for digital identity. The one that that is most common or most pervasive is the ICAO standard, which defines how passports are made up, how they're used as an identity, and they have a digital identity component. So unless again we have a common identity that can traverse the normal world and the virtual world, the metaverses, then we're going to continue to run into these issues where you can create whatever identity you have, and there's no way to validate it, no way to challenge it within the platform that you are attempting to enter to create your identity.
Chris, I could not have said it better.
Any final questions for Chris 2.0 so we can wrap up?
Julian here, Chris. In general, as I say, to keep abreast, there's lots of news articles that come out, but are there probably some main areas that you would recommend with regards to keeping abreast of new developments in this space?
Industry leading sources.
Yeah.
In my looking, what I realize or what I believe is that we're at the phase where it's being covered like news and not like a niche market to study. So I saw articles from Forbes. The one that Dwight posted here is from the New York Post. Washington Post had. There are other ones. Even the one about Barbados being listed in the Decentral one is on the news. But I haven't seen any dedicated places as yet, which is why this slide shows, I bought a domain for this talk actually, called in the meta.space, because I'm going to be covering some of it, at least what is being announced and any other information that comes up that I really think is interesting, like how it's being used over time. Because I haven't seen a central places yet that's covering news about the metaverse.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be very useful because, as I say, I'd rather not wait for CNN to, as I say, scrub it and provide me with that information. All right, thanks.
All right, if there are no more further questions, we could end here. Thank you very much, Chris 2.0, for a very engaging presentation and discussion in terms of answering our questions and overall points on the metaverse. Certainly a lot more discussion to come about this topic as it continues to evolve and become something that's much more relevant to us on our daily lives. I think we have to monitor this space and see exactly what would change, whether or not policies are protecting persons and protecting actual physical cash would evolve as well too. And of course, as well, protecting people's lives from harm and discomfort. So hopefully that could come soon. And as is mentioned, it's up to us as well to kind of chip in and maybe have an opinion, probably help to form, shape this scape in terms of what it should be for us as Barbadians or people living in Barbados, and what a green metaverse should be from protecting humans' life, happiness, and overall comfort of living. I think that's a critical point. Right. So thank you very much, and we greatly appreciate it for presenting tonight. Any other comments?
I just want to thank my son for doing a wonderful presentation and flying the Chris 1.0 flag really high. Good job, son. I'll buy you a bear one these days when you get of age.
Anytime, folks.